My name is Steph Dodds, and I'm an EFT, Emotional Freedom Techniques educator, practitioner, and author. And I wanted to make this video for you of the history of EFT, how it came about, why we use it the way that we do, and maybe talk about where it's potentially going. I wrote about all of this in my book, How Not to Cry, A Guide to Emotional Freedom for Sensitive People. If you're interested in learning about EFT, this is a great beginner's guide with lots of real life examples of myself and those of my clients. So check it out. But for now, let's deep dive into the history of EFT. It all started in the 1970s with a psychologist by the name of Dr. Roger Callahan. Purely out of personal interest, he found himself studying the traditional Chinese medicine practice of acupuncture. He made an accidental discovery one day while working with one of his patients, Mary, who he'd been working with on her water phobia for about 18 months. In the EFT world, this urban legend is referred to as the Mary story. Mary had a pretty severe water phobia most of her life, which you can imagine caused many problems for her, including drinking water and bathing. She had tried many therapies and nothing seemed to help. In traditional psychotherapy, phobias are one of the more complicated conditions to cure. One day at his home office in Santa Barbara, California, Mary had mentioned every time she thought about water, she had a terrible pain in her stomach. Dr. Callahan had just been learning about the stomach meridian acupuncture. So he said, "Why don't you just tap on your stomach meridian point here under your eye?" She did this and boom, she ran outside to the swimming pool that he had in his backyard, jumped in. She started splashing around in the pool and saying, "It's gone, it's gone, it's gone." He thought she may have been losing her mind, but in fact, it was a pivotal moment. Mary's phobia was gone. After the success with Mary, Callahan knew he had discovered something extraordinary and began tapping on different acupuncture points to treat different maladies, and he called this new technique thought field therapy. He was continuously getting unheard of results with specific algorithms for tapping on points to treat emotional issues and began teaching his technique. About 10 years later, in the late 80s, a wonderful psychotherapist by the name of Dr. Francine Shapiro was creating a similar mind body connection technique called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. EMDR is a bilateral stimulation of the body, moving eyes back and forth to break, release, relieve psychological trauma in any given way. She was getting notable results as well and knew that if she ever wanted to get her modality to hold credibility in the formal psychotherapy world, she would need to back it up with many studies. She did 7 years of double-blind hard science studies proving the efficacy of EMDR. Once she had a body of research, she presented it in 1995. It was accepted and is now in practice around the world today. Unlike EFT, you need to be a licensed therapist to study and practice EMDR. The alternative healing world owes Dr. Francine Shapiro a debt of gratitude for proving the mind-body connection and paving the way for the rest of us. Meanwhile, Dr. Callahan was not doing those studies and getting booed off the stage, literally. People called him a quack, a fraud, and said there was no way you could possibly fix a phobia in minutes. Luckily, he did not give up and continued to teach his methods. He actually charged $100,000 to learn thought field therapy. And fortunately, Gary Craig was one of the guys who wrote him a $100,000 check to learn this method. Gary was an extremely bright, self-made millionaire who was an NLP, neuro-linguistic programming master, and very interested in personal growth. He was retired and writing his own coaching programs when he found Dr. Callahan. He had gone to Stanford on a football scholarship and trained as an engineer, but never worked as an engineer. When he was learning thought field therapy, he brought his engineering mind to the process and found ways to dramatically simplify the process. In thought field therapy, if someone has a particular problem, through a series of complicated algorithms, one would find out which tapping points to stimulate for their particular problem. For example, if someone was experiencing grief about their pet dying, they would get a printout of an algorithm recipe, which would tell them which point to tap on and in what order. And if someone had grief about the loss of a friend, it would give you a completely different algorithm recipe and which tapping points to use. Even though they are similar situations, his technology would come with completely different instructions. There was also a 20-minute process of muscle testing to see if an individual was psychologically reversed, meaning, do they really want to keep their problem instead of letting it go? I would like to be clear, muscle testing is a wonderful and extremely helpful practice. I use it myself, but it can be a waste of time when it comes to EFT. Gary Craig was just being his brilliant self when he found a way to make thought-filled therapy extremely accessible and created an abbreviated form of it that we call EFT today. I imagine Gary Craig scratching his head and thinking, this means we will need to do everything by trial and error. Gosh, we are using the same tapping points. Why don't we tap around all the points in a circle instead of tapping on a few and see if it works? Instead of checking if someone is psychologically reversed via muscle testing for 20 minutes, why don't we assume that everyone's reversed? He came up with his own incredibly simplified protocol and shared it in an 80-page manual that he put on the internet for free. You can stop by my website to see Gary Craig talking about the magic of tapping at stephdodds.emotionalfreedomacademy.com. Today, millions of people are tapping around the world. Teachers are leading tapping in their classrooms with students. Psychotherapists are helping their clients lower anxiety with tapping. And even the U.S. Veterans Administration approved EFT as a recommended treatment for PTSD, pain, depression, and a handful of other related conditions. Some people think that Nick Ortner created EFT because in 2008, his family launched the World Tapping Summit and got the word out about tapping to the masses. Every year, interviews are conducted with experts using EFT on various topics, including self-compassion, chronic stress, and financial issues. The Tapping Solution app, which has been downloaded in 130 countries, has over 5 million tapping meditation recordings played. The healing world owes Gary Craig a debt of gratitude for this amazing work. We also owe a tremendous amount of gratitude for all of the healing arts angels paving the way for the rest of us, doing clinical trials, proving its effectiveness, and finding creative ways to share it. Who knows, maybe you will be a part of history in the making in the EFT world. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me for the history of EFT. Please like if you got something out of this video, and please comment below, what is your biggest takeaway from learning the history of EFT? If you're curious and learning more about EFT, I teach EFT level 1 and 2 workshops for practitioners, but you can just learn if you want to have this tool for yourself and for your friends and family and clients. But if you want to become a practitioner, this is a wonderful, wonderful training. Please subscribe if you'd like to get more EFT education and tap along videos. Thank you so much. Until next time.